This is the Breaker.news podcast for the week of June 13th, 2021. I'm Bob Mackin, publisher of theBreaker.news and host of the Breaker.news podcast. Welcome to edition number 190. The Breaker is your source for news, opinion, and analysis about British Columbia issues, institutions, and influencers. Later, I'll tell you how you can support The Breaker. On this edition, headlines from the Pacific Rim and the Pacific Northwest, the Is It Just Me commentary, I award a virtual Nanaimo bar to a difference maker, and the Big Deal feature, remembering the 2011 Stanley Cup riot, a night that Vancouverites wish they could forget. Highlights of the Investigators radio documentary about June 15th, 2011. But first, is it just me? Is it just me, or would you be surprised that expensive beer, wine, and spirits were a BC government policy since day one? The front page headline of the Victoria Daily Colonist newspaper on June 12, 1921 has not aged at all. It says, official prices of liquor fixed. Under new government control system, beverages will not be cheap. The story said that prices announced were practically as high as the bootlegger charged for liquor. The original 6 stores in Vancouver opened June 15, 1921 at 11 a.m. They opened to 7 p.m. every day of the week except for Sunday. You had to buy a $5 a year license plus be 21 years old to buy the goods, which were stored behind a counter. Back then it cost $5 per dozen bottles for Guinness by the pint. With inflation, that's more than $68 today. A dozen Guinness sold in tall boy cans will cost you $39 plus tax today in a store. A dozen pints in a pub, that'll set you back more than $90. The high liquor taxes are how the government sees more than $1 billion in profits a year. The centennial of the end of Prohibition and the start of government sale of liquor in BC also means look back at public health impacts. Everything is good in moderation, but there are drawbacks for those who imbibe too much. A 2008 BC Public Health report blamed alcohol abuse for injury, illness, social problems, economic costs, and premature deaths. June 15th is also another day in the history of booze sales in BC. In 2011, that was Game 7 of the Stanley Cup final, which turned into a riot on the streets of Vancouver after the Canucks lost to the Bruins at Rogers Arena. You can hear more about that later in this podcast. What do you think? Email Bob at theBreaker.news. It's time on the Breaker.news podcast for Around the Rim. We look at news headlines around the Pacific Rim. In Apple Daily, Chinese official jumps to his death after mass marathon deaths. Li Zhuobi, a 56-year-old party secretary of Jingtao County of Bayan City, died one day after a meeting with the disciplinary committee. Li is from the county where 21 people died of hypothermia in a mountain marathon in Gansu province. He allegedly fell to his death. In Taiwan news, Taiwan's KMT calls Singapore activist white supremacist on Twitter. The main opposition party, the Kuomintang, suddenly lashed out at a Singaporean activist and journalist by labeling him a white supremacist and made a cryptic comment about Japanese anime. Roy Ingering had complimented Taiwan President Tsai Ing-wen for relations with the U.S. and Japan, which have aided Taiwan. The KMT Twitter account later apologized, quote, to anyone that might be offended, end quote. ABC News Australia, how the FBI and AFP's Anom encrypted message app snared criminals across the globe. Thousands of police across multiple agencies executed about 500 search warrants, arrested 224 people, charged them with more than 525 offenses, and seized 104 guns, some $45 million in cash, and tons of drugs. Law enforcement agencies in Europe and the U.S. revealed that police across 16 countries had arrested more than 800 people thanks to Anom. They also seized more than 32 tons of drugs, including cocaine, cannabis, amphetamines, and methamphetamines, along with 250 firearms, 55 luxury cars, and more than $148 million in cash and cryptocurrencies. In 2018, the FBI obtained the Anom app from a criminal informant. When police raids shut down the Vancouver-headquartered Sky Global in March, Anom's popularity surged from 3,000 users to 9,000. That's Around the Rim on this edition of the Breaker.news podcast. Now it's time on the Breaker.news podcast for Cascadia Calling. We look at news headlines around the Pacific Northwest. In the Oregonian, Portland promotes massive citywide cleanup at month's end, volunteers needed. More than 20 cleanup events will take place in neighborhoods across the city June 25th and 26th, Mayor Ted Wheeler said. An array of rubbish and debris continues to impact the city's residential neighborhoods, commercial streets, public lands, and right-of-ways. In the Seattle Times, Washington State Winery cancels its 2020 vintage as industry worries about wildfire smoke. Betts Family Winery near Woodinville is the only one so far to cancel the 2020 vintage. Because smoke primarily affects grape skins, red wines are more susceptible since they are fermented with the skins to produce their color. Wine production, distribution, sale, and tourism had a direct or indirect impact of $8.4 billion on Washington's economy in 2018. In Czech news, Victoria votes to cancel virtual Canada Day broadcast. Will produce reflection event later in summer. City Council has decided instead to produce a broadcast that will air later this summer that focuses on reflection. The future broadcast will be guided by the Lekwungen people and will feature local artists in order to explore the idea of what it means to be Canadian. The decision was made by City Council due to the recent discovery of the graves of children at a former residential school in Kamloops. That's Cascadia Calling on this edition of the Breaker.news podcast. This is the Big Deal feature on the Breaker.news podcast. I'm standing in downtown Vancouver. What has changed in downtown Vancouver over the last 10 years? Well, the Laurel Park parking lot is now a TransLink bus loop, and there's temporary apartments to house the homeless. The post office is no longer a post office. It's being converted into an office tower for Amazon. It's going to be called The Post. The Queen Elizabeth Theatre, the CBC, the library, and Rogers Arena, they're all here, of course. The area tends to come alive during sporting events. The last big one was the Canada Sevens Rugby Weekend in March 2020 at BC Place. Then the pandemic was declared a few days later. The Vancouver Canucks went a whole season without any fans at Rogers Arena. But think back to June 2011, when there were too many Canucks fans downtown getting too drunk. Especially on June 15th, 2011, a night of mayhem in downtown Vancouver, after the Canucks were beaten by the Boston Bruins. That night I was freelancing for the New York Times, and I was assigned to write a story about BC's own Mark Recchi, who retired a champion with the Bruins. But I had to delay that story about Recchi because I had to get out and cover the wrecked city. I encountered police and rioters, burned out cars and looted storefronts. It was hard to breathe and my eyes were watery. It turned into the longest night of my career. It was the longest night of many careers. A year later, I produced and wrote a radio documentary about that awful night. Listen to the highlights.
CKNW News Talk 980 presents The Investigators, an in-depth look at the issues behind the headlines. Now, the Stanley Cup riot, 1 year later. Here is correspondent Bob Mackin.
I'm Bob Mackin, and I'm standing in the parking lot in front of the main post office in downtown Vancouver, among office buildings, stores, restaurants, bars, theaters, and the public library. This parking lot still shows scars of a night Vancouver will never forget. Charred pavement from where a car was overturned and lit on fire, graffiti on the outdoor mailbox. The Stanley Cup riot of June 15th, 2011 was a long, ugly night for Vancouver. The Georgia Street live site where it began was intended to rekindle memories of the 2010 Winter Olympics street parties and bring people downtown to boost local businesses. But it backfired. The hangover could cost taxpayers up to $10 million in damage and police and court costs. And the city's reputation was bruised, and 1 year later has still not healed.
The Canucks were the number one regular season team in the National Hockey League and Western Conference playoff champions. Their 40th season would end in the Stanley Cup final against the Boston Bruins. Game 7, if necessary, would be in Vancouver on June 15th, one day after the 17th anniversary of the Canucks' 1994 Game 7, a loss to the New York Rangers, which sparked a riot at Thurlow and Robson Streets. A BC Police Commission report on the 1994 riot warned that crowds are unpredictable at the best of times, and major sporting events tend to be connected to big-money beer marketing. But 17 years later, and 16 months after the Olympics, we were led to believe that Vancouver had grown up. Vancouver Mayor Gregor Robertson.
We've had incredible celebrations in our streets, and that we expect to continue tonight. We've got all the big screens set up again. Georgia Street closed from noon on, and expecting a record crowd again. The biggest so far has been over 100,000, and I think we'll see that again. And hopefully, we just want to keep it all peaceful and happy and respectful and savor this night of raising the cup in Canucks' hands.
Gord, it all comes down to this. One game for the Stanley Cup. CKNW's Penny Daflos is at the Georgia Street live site. Penny.
Hey, Terry, it is absolutely packed in here. We have thousands of people cramming into a very small space. Not only is it standing room only, it's hard to move in here. The press is getting quite intense. Police, as far as we know, have not shut down the site. They were planning on expanding it, but it's not clear what's happening right now. What I can tell you for sure, though, is this crowd is ready for a win. Everybody's focused, everybody's intent, and they're hoping it'll happen tonight. Reporting live, Penny Daflos, CKNW News Talk 980 of Georgia and Hamilton.
More than 100,000 people came downtown on buses, Seabus, and SkyTrain. Booze sales at government liquor stores near SkyTrain stations rose 75%. Provincial authorities ordered early closures downtown after noticing violence, drunkenness, and pre-riotous behavior 4 days earlier. City crews closed Georgia Street in front of the post office at noon. Within 4 hours, the fan zone was so full, some fences were removed. There were 55,000 people jammed in the space, and something had to give. People grew unruly and angry, throwing bottles at the big TV screens and climbing on buildings. A fight among 30 people broke out at Homer and Dunsmuir around 7 p.m.
It's the second intermission. Canucks are down 3-0. They have one more period to go, and the mood downtown in Vancouver is taking a turn for the worse.
Terry, things really seem to be getting tense. I'm in an alley not very far from Homer and West Georgia Street. The thugs, for a lack of a better term, are really outnumbering the police officers. Where I am beside a fence, I'm counting 5 police officers. We have got dozens and dozens of people, angry fans, walking away from the game, the big screen. And here's what one of them told me, Terry. Are you leaving? Are you going home now? Are you fed up?
I'm just going to stay here and take out my anger problem.
So, Terry, that's the sentiment among these people. They're not leaving. They're hanging around. They're angry. And they're vowing to do something, cause some sort of trouble. And it doesn't seem like the situation is really under control at the moment. Reporting live, Janet Brown.
A fire alarm went off inside Rogers Arena with 5 minutes left in the game. Several people were ejected. It's unclear where they went. The riot was already in progress. Just before 8 p.m., a car was flipped over outside the post office and set on fire. People posed for photographs amid the damage. The NHL commissioner presented the Bruins with the Stanley Cup after their 4-0 win. Mobs moved west and took their frustration out on Dagino Ristorante, Blend's Cafe, and the Black & Lee Tuxedo Store at Richards. Hundreds of looters advanced on the Bay and London Drugs, breaking in and taking merchandise.
Let's go to CKNW's Penny Daflos. Penny.
I don't know if this is tear gas or what this is, but there keeps being clouds of smoke opening up all over the place. People are jumping up and down on this car. There's at least 2 fires burning right now. People keep throwing more garbage onto it. It's getting harder to see down here. There's so much smoke. Everybody has their cameras out recording everything.
There were fewer than 500 police on duty. Another 400 were called from around the Lower Mainland and Fraser Valley. By 8:30 p.m., the Vancouver Police read the Riot Act.
Now, let's check in with CKNW's Charmaine De Silva.
The situation here is just getting completely out of hand. Vancouver police have gone on the loudspeaker and declared this an unlawful assembly. They're telling people, everyone has 5 minutes essentially to leave the area. All around me, buildings, the glass storefronts are being smashed, bottles are being thrown. You can actually hear the glass, smashing in the background as I'm speaking to you.
Newspaper boxes were tossed, dumpsters lit on fire. The police used tear gas and pepper spray to quell the mobs. Dozens of drunk and injured lined up for treatment at St. Paul's Hospital. Bridges to downtown were closed. Violence spread on Granville and Robson. Black smoke billowed and explosions were heard.
For the second time in 17 years, the hockey story in the deciding game is a distant second behind the story that's going on in our city. Go ahead, Janet.
Dan, you wouldn't believe what's going on. I'm in the old parking lot of the Greyhound bus station right behind the Queen Elizabeth Theatre. Crowds of people are destroying 2 police cars. They're on the roof of the police car, kicking out the lights, kicking out the back window, kicking out the side window, throwing objects, and people are standing and cheering and clapping. I just don't get this. People in suits are even standing and clapping. They're tipping it over. They're tipping over one of the police cars, and they're cheering. Listen to the crowd. They're cheering. They tipped over one of the police cars right onto the next one right beside it. I just can't believe this mob mentality. Why would people be happy about doing something like this? This is a crazy crowd that's out of control. My goodness me. They're jumping on top of it all now. I can't believe this. And the crowd is cheering.
And Dan...
this is really upsetting. This is really upsetting.
Janet is...
embarrassing. This is embarrassing as a resident of Vancouver. Oh, my goodness. You can smell pot wafting through the air, and 2 yo-yos are on the top of police cars. One is on its side, and they're jumping up on top of it like a trampoline, breaking the windows, breaking the lights, and the crowd has surrounded both vehicles, cheering wildly like they would be at a WWF match. This is unbelievable. Where are the police to stop this? Where are the firefighters with their hoses?
Obviously, she's right in the storm of something that is incredible. I could just sense it, too, coming from the rink to here. But even last night, just saying on the air, man, I hope. I just felt something was going to happen here if the Canucks did not win.
Downtown looked like a war zone. Police regained control. Peace finally returned after midnight. So began the days, weeks, and months of soul-searching. A year later, the scars remain from a night Vancouver will never forget.
This is The Investigators on CKNW News Talk 980.
Across British Columbia on June 15, 2011, millions of Vancouver Canucks fans wanted their team to raise the Stanley Cup for the first time. Instead, thousands of fans, many in Canucks blue, green, and white merchandise, razed downtown Vancouver. The Gino Ristorante manager Francesco Caligiuri was among the 18,860 fans inside Rogers Arena, the biggest indoor licensed establishment on the night. He felt safe in the rink. The mood was different outside.
Walk me through what you saw develop on that afternoon and that evening.
We're walking out, long faces, everybody's sad, and some tears in their eyes, and so on. And about a block in, we started seeing a little bit of rowdy people, and we didn't think much of it at first. And next thing I know is I hear loud noises and windows smashing, cars being lit on fire, and that's when I looked at my wife. I said we should probably leave. And as we were leaving, I said we got to go to the restaurant, check up on my family, and probably it'd be safer in here because it's closed, sheltered, and we're not getting any rocks thrown at us. Instead, once I got here, the restaurant was already under attack, and there was people already starting to throw things, and a few windows were already broken. Within 15 minutes, all the windows were broken. And everybody was terrified and confused and mad and every feeling you can think of. I mean, it was ridiculous. And then I tried protecting them, but then they were pulling me in to save, to not get hurt and things like that. We ended up barricading the restaurant, which had ended up saving the inside of the restaurant at the end. So that was a very, very good idea to just not give them any attention to come in, because once the windows were down, it was very easy for them to come in. So the tables did prevent them from coming in and destroying the inside of the premises.
Peter Raptis, owner of the Sip Restro Lounge and Refinery on Granville Street, was stuck inside Rogers Arena after the game. He obeyed police orders to stay put.
The police were telling us that we were not to leave the stadium unless we had a plan to get out of the vicinity. Of course, SkyTrain wasn't working, cabs weren't coming through, and they basically told us that they wanted us to stay in the building until a later time. So a little bit frustrated. a little bit scared because just of the unknown. We didn't know what was going on. So I was in phone contact with my other business partner who was in the building. And so he was left to kind of manage the scenarios as it was unfolding.
Game 7 was the 25th and last game of the playoffs for the Canucks. Fans increased in number and intensity during the 2-month quest for the Cup. The franchise grossed an estimated $40 million for ticket sales to the 14 home games. In the June 15, 2011 riot, more than 150 people were injured, over 100 vehicles damaged or destroyed, and 90 businesses hit by arsonists, vandals, and looters. Images of the violence and mayhem went global. It was the biggest story out of Vancouver since the 2010 Winter Olympics ended. On June 16, 2011, the morning after the Stanley Cup riot, dozens of volunteers wearing Canucks jerseys came downtown with brooms to help clean up from the riot. The spotlight shifted to Vancouver Police Chief Jim Chu and Mayor Gregor Robertson. How could this happen under their watch? How could Vancouver have a second hockey riot in 17 years? Chief Chu.
And for weeks, we predicted this day, this nightmare, this shame would never come. Despite those predictions behind the scenes, we had always been preparing for the worst. Last night, those preparations became a reality as we quickly shifted from a meet and greet tactic to one of crowd dispersal and crowd safety.
Mayor Robertson.
It basically spread like a virus, but it was a very deliberate group of troublemakers who came downtown to do this. They had nothing to do with hockey. The Canucks, they're not fans. They have nothing to do with our city, frankly, and they do not represent who we are here.
Provincial and civic reviews blamed crowds that were too big, too disorderly, and too drunk, just like the BC Police Commission said of 1994. The police were understaffed, lacked training, and were ill-equipped. The difference in 2011? City Hall organized the party. Why did so many people do so much damage? Richmond's Camille Casnio, a University of British Columbia science student and rowing athlete, pleaded guilty in April to participating in a riot. On a blog, she blamed an adrenaline rush. Quote, "In the same way that everybody enjoyed collectively showing pride in our team, it was enjoyable to express my disappointment in a collective manner. In my immature, intoxicated perspective, all I saw was that the riot was happening and would continue happening with or without me, so I might as well get my adrenaline fix." Unquote. The Downtown Vancouver Business Improvement Association wasted no time. Just 3 days after the June 15, 2011 Stanley Cup riot, it launched the Van Lover campaign to encourage shoppers and diners to come back downtown. It used posters and T-shirts by Cherry Bomb with the words Van Lover inside a heart. Dagino received $2,500 for its insurance deductible from the $120,000 Vancouver Restoration Fund, set up by the Vancouver Economic Commission. After an initial rush of well-wishers, Francesco Caligiuri said it was the slowest summer in the restaurant's history. Dozens of tourists wrote to City Hall, claiming they were canceling their trips because of the riot. The Canucks won another President's Trophy in 2012. There were no live sites downtown. City Hall wanted to hold family viewing parties at community centers instead. The Canucks launched a Celebrate Safely advertising campaign under the slogan, "This is our home." The four-letter word riot was not mentioned. One poster depicted a lone, smiling male Canucks fan in a blue jersey looking east in the middle of the near-empty Georgia and Homer intersection near the post office parking lot. Police, SkyTrain, and provincial liquor officials were making plans in case the Canucks went on another cup run. But the Canucks were upset in the first round by the eventual champion, Los Angeles Kings. Francesco Caligiuri.
I do worry about what happened in '94, that it did go on for about 17 years. So then you do forget about those lessons. Police chiefs change. Policemen change. The mentality changes. You tend to try to forget those type of nights, and I think that's how we fell back into trouble. Not respecting that large crowds can get out of hand and could be very, very dangerous for a riot.
I'm Bob Mackin, and you have been listening to The Investigators. That was The Investigators documentary on the 2011 Stanley Cup riot, narrated by John McComb, technical production by Greg Schott, written and produced by yours truly, Bob Mackin, and it first aired on CKNW and the Chorus Radio Network in June 2012.
I had to have this talk with you. Humanity depends on you. For the love of God, go get your damn vaccine. Vaccine, 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 vaccine. I'm begging of you, please don't hesitate. Vaccine, 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 vaccine. When it's your turn, go get it, please don't wait.
That's the sound of the YVR Pop Choir, also known as the Chorus Studio, with its topical take on Dolly Parton's Maxine, called Vaccine. You can find it on YouTube. The virtual Nanaimo Bar, brought to you by Spruce Hill Contracting. Every week we end the Breaker.news podcast on a tasty note by awarding the goodness of a virtual Nanaimo bar to people making a difference. A virtual version of the province's favorite dessert bar goes this week to refugees who are making BC a better place, and those in BC who have made life better for refugees. June 20th is World Refugee Day. You can nominate someone for a virtual Nanaimo bar. Send us an email to bob@theBreaker.news. Spruce Hill Contracting, custom homes and renovations. Find more information at sprucehill.ca.
So I'm very happy that I'm going to get my Moderna shot today. And I wanted to tell everybody, I think you should get out there and do it too. I even changed one of my songs to fit the occasion. It goes, vaccine, 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 vaccine. I'm begging of you, please don't hesitate. Vaccine, 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 vaccine. Because once you're dead, then that's a bit too late. I know I'm trying to be funny now, but I'm dead serious about the vaccine. I think we all want to get back to normal, whatever that is, and that would be a great shot in the arm, wouldn't it?
Those are the sounds of country music legend and actress Dolly Parton on Twitter. That's it for the Breaker.news podcast for the week of June 13th, 2021. I'm Bob Mackin. Thanks for joining me. Did you know that on June 13th in 1898, the Yukon Territory was formed, and Dawson City was named the capital? If you ever visit the Paris of the North, go to the downtown hotel and order the sourdough cocktail. Tell them I sent you because it's terrific. Now you know. Send me your feedback, send me your story ideas to bob@theBreaker.news. Bookmark theBreaker.news. You can also find us at theBreaker.ca. Sign up for the email newsletter and get updates to your inbox. For news as it happens, follow The Breaker News on Twitter and visit theBreaker.news on Facebook. You can support The Breaker for as little as $2 a month. For more information, go to patreon.com/TheBreakerNews. That's patreon.com/TheBreakerNews. Until next week.